Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a new episode of Iblis Manifestations podcast. I was thinking, and I figured that we would start the new year with a solo episode. I know that whilst in terms of viewership they might be in a bit of a minority, they're actually the most requested when it comes to the hardcore subscribers of the podcast. So this is just something that I wanted to put out there, and I don't want to overdo these, so I really only want to do them if I feel like I have something to say. And there's been a lot on my mind recently, so I figured, why not? Let me share some of my thoughts that I've got going on at the moment. But of course, first of all, I would like to say a Happy New Year to everyone who is listening to the show, to all of the followers, subscribers, even the ones that are sort of peeking from the distance. Happy New Year to all of you. I hope that it's going to be a very fruitful year for most of you out there. And I think that it's going to be a very interesting one. Now, I know that many of my friends, as well as many people around the world, are going to be saying, oh man, there's all this shit happening around the world and it's gonna be fucked up. Yes, but when has shit not been happening around the world? Okay? I get that we might just be on the brink of sheer and total Armageddon, but listen, that doesn't mean that nothing matters then. Well, fuck it all and everything is fucked. No, that's the easy way out. That's the cowardly way out when it comes to your thinking and thought processes, at least as far as I'm concerned. Yes, you could argue that perhaps the cowardly way is to ignore that there are problems. Listen, there are fucking problems, and sooner or later, shit's gonna hit the fan. We know that. We acknowledge that. But in spite of that, we choose to think more positively and more constructively. And I think actually this is how we as human beings can prevail the best that we can. So that's just my thoughts. So with that in mind, once again, Happy New Year. And another thing that I would just really quickly like to talk about before going into the main topic of this episode. A very good friend of not just myself, but my band Trivex, Felipe, he recently passed away on his travels, so I would just like to take a moment to pay my respects and tributes to him. Obviously, I've already done this online, and but I feel like I'd like to give him some mention in this capacity. Yeah, so him and I first met around 4 years ago. I think I'd known him for a little while since before that, but he actually came to one of our shows with Trivex in Banbury. And I'm actually going to take a guess and say that was around beginning of April 2019, I'm going to say, because I actually think that was one of our very last shows with our old guitarist. I believe that was our very last show with him. And I remember meeting him there, and he seemed like a very dedicated guy to this sort of thing, and then what he was doing and whatnot. And we just kept in touch, and he always seemed cool, and he was always very, very supportive of Trivex, and I always appreciated him for that, obviously. And he did some pretty good stuff with his band Ataud as well, and we actually shared a similar producer for some videos as well, which you guys haven't seen yet, but that will come on another day. But he was doing some great stuff there, and obviously everyone knew him for that, and it was very unfortunate because I got much closer with him in the last year or so, I would say, and I'll explain the details of in what capacity we were closer as well. But basically, he had told me that he had some difficulties in his personal life and whatnot, and he just decided in the end to just go traveling, which is actually, that's a fucking great idea, I think, that if you got any kind of problems and if you've got the capacity and the means to travel, especially as a young person, he was only like maybe, I think, a year and a half older than me, something like that. Yeah, we were very much the similar age, and he went traveling, and very sadly, just about, I think it was maybe 2-3 days ago now, I got the news that he had collapsed on his travels, and that, at least as far as I have been told, I don't want to fuck this up, so this is what I've been told, but apparently due to some essentially cardiovascular issues. So he basically had like a bit of a heart attack, and he unfortunately passed away. Now, the capacity which him and I actually knew each other, and besides the thing of just being friends and also being into the same scene, being into the same kind of music and whatnot, and the fact that he was always a big supporter, was actually the fact that for the last year or so, I mean, between, I'm going to say mid to late 2021 till just around like the same time last year, I was actually his fitness coach, and we did a lot of fucking work together, man. And listen, that guy, he fucking dropped about 13-14 kilos. I don't know if people can comprehend how much of a fucking achievement that is, but it's a big fucking achievement. And I was so fucking proud of him for that, man. I always told him that, and it was good. We had a good relationship, and it took a while to get him started on that, but he was always, very appreciative, and I was appreciative of him and the fact that he actually put in the fucking work, and in the end, he had those results. And we had just been talking, I think, around November of getting back together, possibly this year. It was just having a bit of a break due to the reasons I already mentioned, and then this happens, and it really fucking bums me out when you've got someone who and you can see the potential, you can see how much better they're doing, but most importantly, you can see that this is clearly someone who, despite some ups and downs here and there, they're genuinely fucking trying to better themselves. And listen, I fucking respect the hell out of that about anyone, but really makes me fucking sad that even though he was in this process, he gets taken away from us so abruptly. It's fucking cruel, man. It pisses me off, actually. So it's sad to me that I feel like, to an extent, that potential might never ever fully get realized, but at least he had those achievements. And I know that most people know him for his music and being into the scene, but I just wanted to share that with people, just to make you aware of how dedicated he was in bettering himself. And I still think that's a hell of a fucking achievement that he did during that time, and he really changed things around, and I'm fucking proud of him for that, and I have told him that. I'm glad that I told him that when he was around, and so that's just a little tribute I wanted to pay to Felipe. It's very sad, I get that shit happens, but this was just, I wanted to bring some fucking attention to that, and please, by all means, go and fucking listen to Ataud's last record that they released last year. I know he was really proud of that, so go and check that out. I'll even put the link in the description here, fucking go and listen to it, because, that's his legacy now, so, yeah. And I hate to say this, but besides the fact that I find the situation quite upsetting, sad, and somber, that I've just lost a friend, I'm also very fucking angry about this right now. And I don't have to get into this too much, but unfortunately, he is now the third person I have known recently who's under 30 or just above, who's had a sudden, unexpected heart attack out of nowhere recently. Now, I don't have to explain to you why I'm fucking angry about that, but I don't know how long we're gonna keep burying our fucking heads in the sand here, man. Alright? And I really hope that when this can be revisited in the future, that at least we'll have some clearer view and we can prevent this shit from happening, man. Come on. It's not cool. And it's a real loss besides that. And, it's a very frustrating situation. And it feels like an uphill battle. And and I hope that what I've just said doesn't take away from anything to do with him. But I think this needs further investigation, and we need to look into these things a lot further. And again, all my respects and condolences to Felipe's family and other friends and everyone else who knew him. Okay, I'm very fucking bummed out about this. So I know that's a real downer and perhaps a difficult thing to move on to for the rest of the episode, but it was absolutely worth bringing some time and attention to it. So as I said, be sure to support his legacy, and remember him well, and also a reminder to fucking appreciate people when they're actually there rather than when they're gone. So that's an important lesson that always comes back, So anyway, and actually, in line with that, the thing that I wanted to talk about on this particular episode, as you've noticed, the title of the episode says "The grass is greener where you water it," and that's obviously the famously known extension of the other quote, which is "The grass isn't always greener on the other side," and the thing that I actually wanted to mostly point to in regards to this particular phrase or topic, or at least the personal experiences that I wanted to reflect upon, were mostly in line with relationships. Relationships as in, the commitment between people, but also it's something that it's a philosophy that you can very much relate to everything else that you do in life, whether it's business, whether it's any kind of project, whether it's yourself or anything. I think it's a very important philosophy, which I personally carry out throughout life. And I'm hoping that perhaps it'll resonate with you to an extent as well. If it doesn't, feel free to push back and let me know. These episodes don't always have to end where this podcast is. So the thing is that one thing that I am more and more increasingly noticing throughout society nowadays, through my own scope, at least, of having been someone who's pretty much been alone for such a fucking long time. I've been away from my home and family in a different country since just around the time I was 17 years old, and all in the pursuit of this fucking crazy ass goal. So my personal views have certainly shifted throughout time, and in some sense actually become more conservative, and then in other sense become way more anarchist in a sense. And I guess that there's a bit of a paradox and a bit of a duality there, but I'll explain that, and perhaps some of this will make sense to you. Yeah, and by anarchist, I think rebellious is probably a more appropriate word that would apply to my general personality and outlook on life and things in general. So, you see, why do I even choose to go with a title like that? Well, see, we're living in this fucking world where we always seem to be chasing what we don't have. Now, I get that that's a given human quality, or even a flaw, depending on which way you look at it. And I think that there's a problem with the lack of gratitude that we have in life. In that you always see people always starting new projects, but then they never finish it. They never follow through with things. Things always get started and then they don't work out, or the person's not patient enough, so they just move on to something else. That, to an extent, I think it's almost like a process of survival, and then each person is just trying to find out what works for them. But also, to me, it's not a good look, because to me it shows that that person is incapable of following through with their goals and ambitions, even if they might be quite minuscule. Now, you could very easily take the same thing and apply it to relationships as well. You know, someone who's constantly jumping from one tree to the other, you know, it's like there's clearly a problem there, you know, where you're consistently having these kind of issues with people. And I'm not speaking from the point of, I'm not even trying to be judgmental as such, although I think that with a certain viewpoints that I have now, I could definitely translate that into a form of judgment. But at this particular time, I'm just talking about the general. It's almost like looking at someone's CV, right? If they've changed the job every fucking 3 months, you're not going to want to fucking hire that person if you're, let's say, if you're an employer. And I think it's kind of the same with relationships as well. I have found that the older I'm getting and the more I observe things, there's a real fucking problem with our lack of values in some of the traditions that have actually kept us alive for thousands, probably millions of years, you know, throughout evolution. But even throughout culture, you know, family doesn't seem to mean anything to people anymore. And I'm going to break this down into the smaller aspects of this, and let's just talk about a relationship nowadays and what it means to actually be in a relationship with someone. You know, and that in itself is a fucking complicated thing. You know, I always say, I make the example that each person has their own fingerprints, right? Now, you think of that and then put that in the context of a relationship where you put two people together, and that's even more fucking unique. You know, that goes to show you that no relationship is ever the same as another one. No person is ever the same as another person. Humans, we might treat each other as replaceable, but nothing in this life, especially as people, no one can be replaced, you know. Just like now, you know, in accordance to the earlier part of this episode, Felipe can't be replaced now. He's passed away. And you have to think of this in the sense that when we've got what we've got in life, we don't look at people as people anymore. We look at them as fucking options. Now, why is this problematic? Well, because there's a whole element that goes into human connection. It's beyond just the words that we share with each other. It's beyond just the similar tastes and styles that we might have in common. You know, it's beyond all of that. I believe very much in the soul of a person. Now, you could go into the scientific aspect of it and then say that, well, that's their magnetic field, you know, and it's caused by the brainwaves or whatever. Yeah, I'm for that. But let's just look at it as a soul. You know, there's nothing wrong with that, in my estimate. And that's what we are as people. That's why, especially when it concerns a sexual relationship, that's a level of connection that you cannot replicate on any other level. No level of knowing, you know, like just being in touch via your phones or fucking, that's a deep level of connection. That's a universal way of connection where you are literally tapping into another person's generational memory. Forget, you know, what their fucking favorite color is. This is so much deeper than that. You are connecting almost with the ancestors of that person. You're connecting with the very thing that makes them who they are. Now, this is why I always say that the physical side, yeah, it's all right, you know. For us guys, it's mostly a performance-based job, but you know, it's very much that the physical aspect is only like 5% of the work. And and that 5%, you got to give it on, you got to give it your all, and it's gotta be good, and it's a great experience. But that's a very small part of the greater scope of things that happens. To the point that, I mean, you can very much look into occult or magic, and you can see the benefits of sex magic and things of that nature, which I would really like to discuss further with other people who are perhaps a little bit more better versed on these things than I am on the podcast in the future. And yeah, it's a very powerful tool. However, we've got this tool right at our doorstep, unless you're a virgin, which, again, that could also be a powerful thing, but that's a very, very, very complicated thing. It's only a powerful thing if it's out of choice, not the fact that, you don't have the options. If it's out of choice, much respect. I actually respect any man and woman, actually, who chooses to stay that way until, meeting the right person. I know this is a religious mentality that I always fucking hated for years. It made me so uncomfortable, but actually, I kind of look at it now, and having at least somewhat of a better spiritual understanding of what sex actually does to a person, I think that's actually a pretty good fucking idea. And of course, that can be debated, and that can absolutely go wrong, because I get that there's abusers and there's absolute cunts out there, and you could be saving, you could end up with the absolute wrong person. So when I say you tap into another human being's memories and even the way of their ancestors, that could actually go very fucking wrong. And I feel like I've actually witnessed that happen in real life before. But basically, like, one human being is not just what they are as the bag of flesh and bones that just fucking walks around. There's a lot more to it. There's a whole field of things that are going on, which in the three-dimensional world you might not just be able to see with your bare eyes. Although a lot of times we can feel and sense these things, even if we're pretty much just out of touch, or I should say out of tune with that side of reality. You can always sense and feel these things, and a lot of that, I guess, goes back to the very first episode of the podcast, where I made the example that if two people are in a room and they have an argument, and you walk in that room not knowing they've had an argument, you will know that they've had an argument because you can sense it in the air. We are a lot more than just our three-dimensional physical bodies, and science has proven that as well. Another thing that science has also proven is the fact that I believe 95% of time, or at least it was a study, and God, I wish I could link this because I'm really speaking off the top of my head here. Feel free to search this up. However, there was a study that I believe it had 95% accuracy, that if someone had another person looking at them, even if they were looking at the back of their head, they would know that that person's looking at them. Now, you can try this for yourself, right? You go on the public transport, keep looking at someone. Eventually, they're gonna get weirded out, and they're gonna turn around and look at you. Or sometimes you're there yourself, and then you have someone, you can feel that someone's looking at you, and then you turn around, and then you lock eyes with them. It's like, motherfucker, do you want to throw down? Well, maybe not always, but that's just my way of thinking. I want to fight everyone. I don't. But it's good to be like that as a man, I think, and be on your guard at the very least. And, there's just these little subtle things, but I as always, I look deeper into things, and I think you can very much integrate that into the whole thing with sex as well. Now you're as close as you physically can get. I mean, you can maybe chop up the other person and fucking eat them. That might be one way of getting close, but I think sex is a better way to actually get close to someone. Just my opinion. And that's a very powerful thing. And when you look at other people as options, when you look at them as just something to use for that moment, for that 5% physical pleasure, and to just throw them away, it's almost like not only you are doing that to them, but you're kind of doing that to yourself. Because I've got this idea that, I don't know how I developed this way of thinking, but It's a long story. I think I'd have to really dissect my own personal, I guess, romantic life, which perhaps on someday I will. But the thing that I learned early on was that, or at least this was my impression, was that when you're born, and especially if you're born into a good home where you've got parents that are looking after you and they feed you with all this positive energy and they've got your back and they're supporting you, and you know, and all your grandparents, you know, you've got their prayers behind your back. And listen, I know that not everyone is like this, and this is actually part of what I'm going to say. You know, so you have all of that positivity and all of that energy, and I believe that energy, we can call it love, right? Because I think it's essentially that, it's love. All of that love that you carry around within you, when you grow older and when you start having sex with other people, you're sharing that love with them. And I believe that if that other person, whatever level they're on, if they don't have that same love, and I'm not necessarily saying that this has to be transferred down through parents as such, although that's a very big part of it, it's just something that each person carries within them. But that doesn't mean that just because they carry that within them that it's equal within everyone. It's actually the thing, it's the soul, it's different between every person. And I think that every time you have intercourse with another person, you exchange that love that the two of you have got. And that's exactly why it becomes a very powerful experience. Now, if you're just doing that with someone who you don't know their background, you don't know what they've been through, you know, that might as well very well be a very traumatized human being with a terrible background. And that's not to say that people should be excluded based on their backgrounds. No. What I'm saying is that you should pay attention to that, because then by having that experience, you're becoming like a sponge to their experiences. So whatever trauma, whatever emotional baggage, whatever they've got, you're going to absorb that. And I don't mean this in the sense of, well, if you don't talk about it, then how the fuck would you even know they went through that? No, listen, man, it's deeper than that. You're entering another human being's energy field and you're taking in everything that they've got. And in return, you're giving them yours. And this is why you always see people change so much, especially when they get into a relationship. Like I've even noticed like physical changes, like someone's face looks different after they've been with someone for a while. It's a very fascinating thing. Or you can, and this is, I don't think this is to do too much with like, I don't know, like, oh, maybe that person changed their diet. No. There's like a very clear, distinct difference that you can see in someone's eyes, especially when they've gotten with someone else, and you can always tell, or like you always hear this, like when someone's been single for a fucking long time and then they finally get laid and then they come back and then it's like, you look so bright, and then you always see that difference in people. It's a very interesting thing. I hope that some of you listening will have at least paid some attention to this, because it's truly fascinating stuff, and I don't think we've tapped into it well enough, or at least if we have, the information is not mainstream enough, because it really should be, because we are now living in a culture where we're not giving a shit about any of that. We don't care. We're almost like the higher body count you got, it's something to brag about. Whereas on a spiritual level, and I'm not talking strictly religious like Christian or Muslim, no, certainly not, although it can apply to that as well, but I think that it's that's a very tragic thing to brag about such a thing, and I get that. Listen, like, I'm in a black metal band, I've lived the rock and roll lifestyle to an extent. I don't think I ever went too far with it. But you can sort of understand the fact that I wasn't always of this mindset. However, the older that I'm getting, the more that I'm observing relationships, the more how I'm observing relationships affect not just me, but the people around me. It's bringing me closer and closer and closer and closer to these same conclusions. Now, this is exactly the thing that I was talking about in regards to the body count situation as well. Uh, it's like, to me, especially, I don't think that a lot of women or a lot of girls are getting taught this, but that is almost like bragging about body count is almost bragging. It's almost the same as bragging about how many people have broken into your house and stolen things and took them away. Because, like I said, every time you have intercourse, you might be doing it for the physical urges and whatnot, and yeah, that's nice. It's necessary. It's a very necessary part of life, and needs to be kept in regulation, of course. But just doing that with a random person, it's like you're giving a part of yourself away that you're never gonna get back. So why would you fucking do that to yourself, especially as a young person? And it frustrates me how that's almost more encouraged nowadays in society. And again, listen, I'm open to all the fucking pushback on this idea, but this is just the way I view things, and this is my podcast, so I'm just sharing my viewpoint. But let's look at another thing as well. So, and this brings us directly to the actual title of the episode, because until now I've pretty much just been talking about sex. But it's a very important thing, and I don't want that to take away from it. I obviously say that in a joking terms. But when I say the grass is greener where you water it, one thing that is lacking very much, also a consequence of everything that I've just mentioned in regards to the current sex culture and the disaster, which is promiscuity, is that loyalty no longer exists. We view each other as options. We view each other as a ladder. Almost, that person, I could use that person to look better or something. And, on an evolutionary scale, yes, there is actually a little bit of a weight to this, which is very fucking hard pill to swallow. But I say this because I see people who are in relationships, but then they get distracted too much with, there's all these thoughts that will go through your head when you're in a committed relationship of, like some people will go on Instagram and then they'll see all these other women, and then it's like, oh wow, I wonder what that would be like, and then, or like the same, it's probably even more common for women to think that about other men. They've got a girlfriend and then you've got a boyfriend, but then you're thinking about them. And I talk about this because I know I've spoken to people that I absolutely trust, and they've been very open about this. And, these thoughts do occur to people. And you gotta think, man, you never know what that other person, let's say just hypothetically, right? Let's just stick to that Instagram example that I made. When you're looking at someone, obviously, first of all, social media is fake. It is absolutely fake. We all know that it is fake, but then we all still take it too fucking seriously, right? How I project myself on there might not be a perfectly accurate example of how I am in real life. And not only that, it's the same for you. It's the same for everyone else that I have ever known, right? So you can't take that too seriously. So if you find yourself getting attracted to something that's on there, always question it, because you don't fucking know that person. You don't know what kind of traumas they've been through. You don't know what kind of emotional baggage they're fucking carrying, right? And listen, I get it. It's easy for us to fall into these kind of ways of thinking and whatnot. And I guess I'm mostly speaking to people who are already in relationships here, but I think this can apply to anyone who's single as well. Because you have to get to know what's behind the veil of that. and this is how people find themselves in really awkward situations, because yeah, all right, someone might look good, that's fine. But what are they actually like? How do they treat other people? How are they trying to better themselves? How are they trying to live a better life? And these are the real questions that we should be asking about another person. There's the thing of, like when you go to the restaurant and then you have to look at every single fucking option on the menu, and then you're so torn, like, oh, which one do you choose? Oh, fuck. We've all been there, right? But those of us that are able to get past that decision making and make a decision that at the time feels right and then stick to it, that's, and then that's the best quality to have, I feel, when it comes to these things. Now, I'm going a little bit in circles here, so I'm going to specifically talk about the relationship aspect of it. If you find yourself thinking about other people and stuff, which, by the way, is natural. It's fine to fucking do that. That's a very normal human thing. So when I say it's a weakness, it's not a weakness in the sense of, oh, you can't control your thoughts. No, it would be a weakness in the sense of if you considered it. If you considered abandoning ship for that thing, which is what leads to a lot of cheating and a lot of really terrible things come out of that too. I've seen that in with close friends of mine, where it's either happened to them or something, and it's not good, man. It's and that's the part where I say it's a weakness. Why? Because you made a choice to commit to someone, and you committed to them, and then rather than communicate things to them, you're willing to abandon ship. And the thing is, the grass is greener where you water it, right? Relationships aren't about this spontaneous, all the fun fucking little sparks that you go through. They're about loyalty, commitment, respect, and that, what defines love, that's a choice that you have to make. That's a choice that you make on a day-to-day basis, one day at a time. And that's what that is. That's what real commitment is. And the whole point of it is to build things together, is to create something together that you otherwise wouldn't have been able to do on your own. And listen, I get it. It's hard. It is very, very tough to be married or to be in a very long-term serious relationship. Now listen, I have been married, but the thing is that you just have to understand that it's not all about the short pleasures, but rather the long, disciplined reward. It's high risk, high reward being in a committed relationship. And I say something as well as an advice to all the other guys listening to this as well. If you want to be productive with what you do, let's say if that's whatever goals you've got, whether it's with work, a career, a project, even fitness, one thing that I would say is extremely important is to either stay away from women completely or just dedicate yourself to one person. Because the whole thing of jumping around from one tree to the other is like starting a new project and then just leaving it unfinished, and then it's there for eternity, and then just starting a new project, leaving it unfinished, leaving it for eternity. It's not, I don't think it's really great to do that, especially because as a guy, you kind of do most of the work, and it's like there's not really a lot to be proud of, if you ask me. It's like, yeah, I get that it's a fun game to, hey, let's see if I can make it to the end of this, and then when you do, there's a little bit of a reward at the end of it. But I don't know. It's promiscuous sex is very similar to gambling, I find, is that in that you're kind of trying your chances, and it's a very addictive game too. I get that, but I think that you end up throwing away more of yourself than you actually end up really gaining anything in return other than perhaps just some validation. And I know this is perhaps a bit difficult for some to take in, but I think that's very much the case. And you can see that. You can see that in people who've dedicated their lives just to do that, and you can see how fucking empty and shallow it is, man. It's just sad, you know. And listen, not everyone is born to be with another person forever, and shit always goes wrong. And like I said, you gotta treat it one day at a time. You know, like if someone says to you, oh, you have to be with this person for the rest of your fucking life, well, that's a terrifying thought. It's like, holy shit, I'm never gonna have sex with another person again. You know, that's a tough thing. But at the same time, the two of you will get to grow together, and you get to treat it one day at a time, and you grow together. Because the thing is as well, down the line, that person that you're with is not going to be the same person that they were when you first got together anyway. There's always going to be room for growth and change. Sometimes you grow apart, sometimes you grow closer. But the point is that people change all the time. The point is that you chose to commit. That you made the choice day in, day out to commit, to build things together. And this is all besides the sort of logistical factor of the fact that if you're spending all your time just messaging random girls and people, that's a lot of time. That's a lot of fucking investment, man. It's much easier just to have one person that you know you can rely on. And obviously you gotta choose your person wisely. This is a very tough thing to do, especially nowadays, due to everything that I've basically just said already. But you know, you can make it. It's fine. You know, we do much better as people when we are in those circumstances. And it's good to experience being in solitude as well, you know, because that also, you know, that gives you a lot of different perspectives as well, which is why I say that I think the best way to go about it is to either be completely alone or, you know, completely committed. And I think that the rewards are much greater. The rewards are much greater. And I tell you why this is so good is because, listen, nothing will give you a reflection of yourself and your own bullshit like being in a relationship. And I think that's honestly one of the most important things about it, is that you get to see what you're really like. Yeah, sure, you know, you might have your friends or you might have people at work and how they see you, but they won't be able to see you the same way that someone who's as close to you as a partner does. And I think that it can be both an incredibly humbling thing, but also a very, very encouraging thing too, because then you know what you're working with. Then you know who you really are, you know where you stand. And I think that's powerful, man. You know, and listen, I'm sure there's plenty of other podcasts and like motivational videos and whatever out there that'll probably tell you the same thing, but these are just the conclusions that I have personally come to in my own life. And perhaps part of that will change throughout time. Perhaps it won't. It'll only get stronger. But the point is that I think that commitment and loyalty and respect are everything in this world. And it is something that is increasingly being reduced. And, you know, to the point that if you have those circumstances, then you're probably some kind of a fucking extremist. And, yeah, I think that's pretty much the most of what I had to say, man. And I really hope... I hope that I convey the point across, and particularly my frustrations with the modern promiscuous culture and the bullshit Tinder culture. I think it's sad, you know. People are more than that. You know, who is listening to this, you are more than just being on someone's screen with a short-ass fucking bio. You have your whole life story behind you. There is much more to you. And I think that you should embrace that more, rather than just trying to do this quick, short sales pitch. Over what? For nothing. You're giving yourself away. For what? Find value. Find value in connections and commitment and loyalty. It's much, much better for you, I reckon. And having said that, I think I'm going to wrap up the episode. And yeah, you know, if you made it this far, I appreciate you. And yeah, I never thought being the person that I am, that one day I'd be fucking sat here giving some relationship advice. And listen, I can tell you certainly that I'm not perfect. I am not perfect at all. This is why I have these thoughts, is because I am not perfect. But I understand where the flaws are. Why? Because I have people close to me who can mirror that back at me. And I can understand. And I'm trying to improve and get better. And I encourage everyone else to take on that mindset. Stop being the victim of, toxic bullshit X. Yeah, sure, that happens to all of us too. But you can move past that, and rather than focus on the negatives, focus on just bettering yourself and just be your happiest version that you can be. All right? And yeah, this is not all too heck, if you ask me. But anyhow, I appreciate you guys all listening. This is a very unusual, maybe almost too open and candid of a talk, but I felt like it was necessary. My heart was yearning and telling me that, hey, Shayan, you should tell people what you really think about this. And yeah, like I always, this is a risk for me too. But you know what? Fuck it. Let's take some risks. Fuck it. Let's put it out there. Let's, because it feels right. You know what I mean? And it feels good. And I really hope that you guys took away some hopefully some positive elements out of this. And as always, I keep saying this, but my inbox is open, and there's plenty of comment section space where you can let me know of your thoughts or any feedback or even any pushback. I welcome all of that wholeheartedly. Now, with that in mind, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening to the podcast thus far. I hope that you enjoyed this one. I enjoyed rambling at you with my internal knowledge. Or external, as they say, the consciousness is actually only an antenna or a receiver. Haha! Yes, so we're gonna have a lot of fucking cool guests coming on the show, man. I've already booked 3 conversations in January alone, and there's actually gonna be more, I think. I'm just in the talks now, and I'm gonna bring you some really interesting fucking guests. I've got guests not just who are black metal musicians, but also I've got people who do, well, I guess I might give it away if I tell you what they do. But I've got very interesting people coming on, and I cannot fucking wait to talk to them. But since it's the beginning of the year, I wanted to talk to you guys one-to-one, man-to-man, or man-to-woman, or man to they them. I don't know what they you are. Anyway, hope you guys have a good start to the year, and I will speak to you all very soon on the next episode of Iblis Manifestations. Cheers.